You're listening to Zodiac Speaking, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, Missing Persons, DNA ID, Beyond Bizarre True Crime, Scene of the Crime, Campus Killings, and Killer Communications. All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
This is a Zodiac Speaking.
Welcome back to another episode of Zodiac Speaking. With us today is Ross Geraci, Andrew Gray, and Ned DeHaan. We're having a final discussion about Alex, the guy that's making the wild claims. And if you've tuned into our first two episodes, you sort of have an understanding of, what we've talked about. The first part, it was that wonderful series that Dave Ranchak did on an expose sort of investigative journalism that he did. It was fantastic. And then, part two, we had Julia Kelly, a FBI profiler, really respected in her field. I think she enlightened a lot of people. And then this episode, we're sort of going to just do a free-for-all roundabout. And, the three guests here today are all very knowledgeable on this case. They have their own, sort of following their own parts they played in this case, and they've all researched it, talked about it for years. So I wanted to have everybody in one spot, and everybody here gets along with each other. There's no hard feelings. There's no animosity. There's no arguing. There's no drama, and that's sort of what I was looking for. So I'm happy all three were able to come on.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Again, sort of free for all. I don't know who wants to start out, but anybody brings something up, we can all talk about it. Let's dive in.
Do you have a note you want to do, Drews, or?
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I have a page of notes which I would like to read. This theory does not interest me. And after Dave's exhaustive, brilliant investigative documentary, I have no further questions. There's literally nothing about what they've put forth that I'm interested in. I'm literally just here to hang out with my friends.
Well, that was a short and sweet note, I guess.
No, I have more.
Okay.
I have more. I want to say that I absolutely respect Richard's decision not to contribute to this distraction, which honestly doesn't merit the attention it has received. Clearly, there's no reason to suspect that Marvin Margolis killed anyone. That said, I think we should separate the silliness of this cruelly exploitative team's grift from the worthwhile, age-old comparison of these two cases. The distinctions between these highly unusual press-fueled murder campaigns are significant. Obviously, we should be wary of any theory that connects infamous cases decades and hundreds of miles apart, but there's value in the analysis. The Black Dahlia and Zodiac cases seem unrelated based on the virtually opposite modus operandi displayed during the murders. We've got a residential torturer versus a public space blitz attacker. But a linkage shouldn't be dismissed based on that alone. Both perpetrators were evil, psychopathic megalomaniacs living at the same time in the same state. Short's killer was likely of an age that would allow him to lure her to an unsafe space, so probably in his 20s. And the Zodiac 20 years later was described by the most reliable witnesses as being in his 40s. While the Avenger seemed very interested in his victim, and Zodiac showed no interest whatsoever in his victims. There are consistencies in their signatures, some practical, others theatrical. Both engaged and taunted the police, supplied physical evidence, and gave themselves monikers. Both courted the attention of the press and sought to terrify their communities. Other aspects of signature were entirely different. The Avenger sought to mutilate and humiliate his victim, while the Zodiac just took or left his trophies from the scene and absconded. The Avenger ensured that his victim was deceased, and the Zodiac allowed half his victims to live long enough to speak to the police. While both killers seemed confident that they could not be connected to the victims, the Avenger took the precaution of ensuring that there were no prints to discover on the body or on his letter, and chose to present his display in the early dawn. Zodiac chose moderately discreet attack sites, but not only left his shell casings, it seems like it was his plan to do so that he could prove his involvement through future correspondence. He also knowingly left victims alive, and almost immediately after the attacks called the police to let them know where they could be found and given aid. Margolis lived a long time, uh, and had no known violent history. He had a very recent and prolonged connection to the victim that multiple people knew about. If you wanted to kill Short, it would be foolish to make such a spectacle, prompting such a high-profile investigation. Clearly, the police would focus on young men in Short's life. Even if he knew he could get away with murder, Margolis would know that they would talk to him and other people who knew of his connection to her, and that his fiancée would soon be apprised of his suspicious living arrangements with Short. End of statement.
Well, that was well thought out and, very, very detailed compared to mine. I'll give mine at the end. But what Ned and Ross, what do you guys think about what Drew just had to say?
Ross, do you want to go first or do you want me to go?
Up to you, Ned. You can take it away.
Okay, well, once again, Morph, thank you for having us here on Zodiac Speaking. Now, we've done a couple episodes about this subject, and the first one was talking to David Orchak, who did a three-part video series where he has more or less proven to most people's satisfaction that this is a fraudulent theory. And we also had the FBI profiler on to talk about how there really isn't a whole lot of basis for defending this theory from a profiling standpoint. But one thing, though, that we have to remember is the general public does not back down from theories that have been popularized. Gary Stewart was exposed as a fraud on national television, pushing his Earl Van Best theory in the book The Most Dangerous Animal of All, and people are still defending him. One thing the general public needs to realize is that if people have been exposed as frauds, you don't need to keep defending them. You don't need to say, oh, well, his name can still be found in the ciphers. Those things are not helpful and they are not practical. We even see this in other true crime cases, such as with the D.B. Cooper case, and Dan Greider saying that he found D.B. Cooper's parachute, and he found a completely different one, and it has been 100% debunked, yet people are still defending him. So my prediction is that there are going to be people who are going to defend this Marvin Margolis Zodiac Black Dahlia connection as long as the case is unsolved. Marvin Margolis will be their Zodiac suspect. They will think that Alex Baber has cracked the case, and they're going to say things to the effect of, oh yeah, well, he had a picture of the victim that had the word Zodiac in the corner, and that means that he was both the Zodiac and the Black Dahlia Avenger. That's not practical. That is not a useful way to solve two high-profile unsolved mysteries. Just looking at this type of evidence, especially when you look at David Ornchak's effort that he put in to show that Alex Baber has a very big history of not telling the truth. If somebody is lying to you, then looking at those little flimsy pieces of evidence is not the way to go. You cannot say that that's more important than somebody is lying, somebody is acting like a con man, and somebody is making this up mostly for attention and then profit second. That's all for me.
Great
That's
stuff. Oh, good. More.
yeah, I was just gonna say that's sort of I think backing up everything, Drew had to say. What do you think, Ross?
Yeah, 100%. I like Drew's list. Ned's done a great job in the last 2 episodes. I mean, I think the real nuclear neutron bomb that everybody should check if they're, interested in the Zodiac case or kind of want to hear the true side of this Baber story is David Orantrack's trilogy of videos, which came out recently. I had dropped a short on Baber a while back, but if I had known David's videos were coming out, I probably wouldn't even have been bothered, to be honest with you guys. But thanks to Morph for having me on again. Definitely check out my pre-canonical episode where we talked Davis and Domingos Edwards. I'm sure we'll be getting a little bit of Davis in the mix today, and obviously Ned, Morph, and Druzer have all been on my series, The Zodiac Files. But yeah, I checked out the last 2 episodes. Really great stuff, and obviously, you know, having seen David's 3 videos, it's really amazing when this thing came out because, it leaked out on Daily Mail and maybe some of these Fox News websites and stuff. And one thing I'd kind of like to point out is whenever people come with one of these outlandish theories, be it linking a major known case to Zodiac or just kind of a random suspect that essentially none of us think could even add up to, the evidence of the case, they always try to kind of go around the Zodiac community, and I'd like to point that out. You definitely don't see them hitting up Ned to get on Black Box Radio. Definitely want to stay far away from my channel. They definitely want to stay very far away from anything that Druzer is involved with because they know that, all of us know the facts and just these just completely random theories that, sound pretty good when you browse a summary of a news article. But when you start to pick them apart, essentially none of it adds up. And I think that's really what David's trilogy shows you is that there's essentially zero basis for this. This is somebody who is investigating a totally different suspect in Lawrence Kane at the time was running with a two-man theory. And then eventually, for whatever reason, you guys can explain to me if that's ever been figured out of why Lawrence was dropped along the way. And apparently it's just Marvin Margolis now, aka Marvin Merrill.
Yeah.
It was a huge red flag that he didn't that this guy didn't get another Zodiac expert to weigh in at all. Like, you didn't get a call, did you, Morph?
No, he skipped me altogether. I feel kind of left, upset that he didn't reach out to me.
I'm sure.
I
Yeah,
probably
but,
should
like
have mentioned Morph first, the Zodiac Speaking podcast. Yeah, there's no way that was going to happen, Morph.
Well, that was a good point you made because you're right. It seems like when these people make these giant claims, they purposely skip out the people that have been covering the case the longest, that know the case the best, and almost like they know that it's never going to get traction. It's going to be rebuffed right away, and they want no part of that. And you can go back. You can go back to the case breakers. You can go back
Yep.
to Gary Stewart. I mean, it's just all right. Let me put this out there, but not talk to any of these people. Although, from what Dave was telling us, Alex did reach out to him and didn't like what he had to say. So,
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, there's one thing that I would like to jump in on, and that is that I have no problem if somebody wants to finely tune their theory, or if they change their mind, or if they have reversals. Maybe at one point they thought that the Zodiac was a team of 2 people. Now, later on, their theory is that it was actually just one person, if they're honest. I think the reason why we're talking right now is because we have documented evidence that this whole killer in the code setup was not honest, that the evidence was altered. As a case in point, the first photo that was shared to the Daily Mail and the LA Times of Marvin Margolis was doctored with the superimposed glasses, altered the hairline. I mean, that alone is a dishonest thing to do, as opposed to blatantly lying about how the name Marvin Merrill was discovered, saying it was found in the Z13 cipher using AI when it was actually found by a different researcher, TM, in 2019, going through census records. And that's the problem. It's not so much for me that, oh, well, I used to think it was 2 people. Now I think it's one person. No, it's that someone has not been telling the truth. And if they haven't been telling the truth consistently for a period of years, that is just screaming fraudulent behavior. So that's my issue.
And what do you
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think,
mean,
Ross?
I don't mind if somebody changes their theory from a two-man to a one-man theory, but, like, a few questions about that, right? Like, where did the first guy go? Also, neither of these suspects, Lawrence Kane, I respect Detective Harvey Hines' work of what he did there, but really doesn't have any connection to the canonical victims, right? Can we just be realistic about that? Like, this is a guy who's connected to Donna Lass and maybe Kathleen Johns if you want to reach. And, again, Marvin Margolis, right? Where did he live? San Jose or something at one point, but same thing. Like, he's not really connected to downtown San Francisco or Vallejo in any way. So I can expound a bit on that. The whole, Oceanside Ray Davis connection. I don't know if that's my fault or just the internet's fault in general, but I'll let you guys weigh on that because it's the same type of thing, right? If you're connecting him to Ray Davis, then you better have something good pointing him in the direction of Paul Stein. And I just never say, if we want to go down the evidence of what these original articles claimed about the bayonet, and we can get into some of the more of the outrageous claims, like, I just didn't see any of these things as a strong Zodiac connection. The Zodiac Motel. One funny thing is, I don't know if you guys saw it, but Baber never even mentioned that, Zodiac wrote on Monarch paper, and apparently so did the Black Dahlia Avenger. That's really one of the only, similarities that I see. Druser mentioned his intro, and you guys all mentioned the Black Dahlia Avenger was way more careful with the forensics. Zodiac wasn't. So if he's going to chop up this body and leave it in a downtown area, then why is he not going to be careful at all when he's writing these very many Zodiac letters, touching Brian Hartnell's door, touching Paul Stein's cab? He just throws everything he learned out the window. And generally, I mean, Ned and Morph, you would know way more than me, but don't these type of killers generally become more careful as they learn
Exactly.
more and not less so? So again,
Exactly. Killers, as they progress, get better at what they do. They get better at hiding stuff. They get better at getting away with stuff. They don't go in the opposite direction. So, that's a very valid point.
the Baber theory is he worsened.
Yeah, but got a lot more gentle.
Well, there's one thing that was brought up though about like why was there this shift from the two-person team of Lawrence Kane and Marvin Margolis to just one killer? And we talked about some of that on the second episode, and I fully admitted that this is just guesswork on my part, and that is that the name Marvin Merrill fits more easily into the Z13 cipher than Lawrence Kane or Lawrence Klein. And then I was expecting that Alex Baber realized, oh, wait a second, now I can just say that Marvin Merrill was responsible for both sets of homicides, the Black Dahlia Avenger and the Zodiac crimes, and then Lawrence Kane was no longer needed for the equation. That's just pure guesswork on my part, but I do think that that's what happened.
Yeah, and I think it's when you have a more grander theory, when you have two people involved with each other, and one of them being longtime suspect Lawrence Kane, who I've never thought was a real good Zodiac suspect myself, but when you're linking two people like that, now you've got more to prove and more. There should be lots more that you can find now that you got two people, especially because Hines did all the work on getting material out there. So I think he probably realized that, hey, I've got enough stuff here I can try and sell with him without linking Kane to it. And he just sort of made him disappear out of the equation, which, that to me, I get you can always change your theory or change your thinking and say, okay, maybe this wasn't what I originally thought. But for him to just completely make Kane disappear out of this equation, I think it just speaks to, him either A, feeling like he would be found out that he couldn't link the two eventually, or it just would be too hard to try and sell people on a theory. It'd be much easier if it was, one person doing all this stuff.
Well, there's something though that I think we need to touch on with that, and that is that I firstly don't think the general public would want to hear a lot about this whole Lawrence Kane MS theory. That's what we used to call Marvin Margolis in the media MS. And it's like, firstly, what on earth are you talking about? How would you share that en masse to a wide audience? And furthermore, I don't think they would understand it. Just Lawrence Kane and MS are this tag team of serial killers who committed 107 homicides. A lot of people couldn't digest that. But if you say that this guy, Marvin Margolis, was changing his name all the time, going around the country as a super killer committing 107 homicides, some people will want to hear that. Is there any credibility to that? No. But some people will want to hear that narrative. So that's what I think it was done. I think it was about making it more palatable to a wider audience. But that's bad because that's using a true crime case as just entertainment. It's taking real stories, the stories of real murder victims, and just saying, how can I make this more entertaining so people will listen to me? Not good at all.
And I also think he could have used Kane originally just to pull some, um, I don't know what the right word is, pull some inference from the Zodiac world and just connect it to Margolis and then get that attention and then just let Kane fade in the background as opposed to just introducing Margolis as a brand new, fresh suspect with no ties to Zodiac. Hey, I'll just start it off with he's tied to Larry Kane, and everybody's heard about Larry Kane. So I think that could have been why he originally did it, and then just eventually felt he had enough traction he didn't need to have Kane involved, and it probably hurt his case because it was harder to believe a two-man team was involved.
Yeah, well, he didn't like as Ross brought up, this fellow didn't try to convince anyone in the Zodiac community of of this theory. And Connolly didn't get any experts involved either, and that is a big red flag.
And speaking of experts, I mean, the fact that he's got these, experienced people with impressive resumes, investigators on his side and buying into this and on such flimsy and weak evidence, it makes me question them, their thinking, Are they maybe not as good at investigations as their resumes reflect? Because, one of them even said, what was the quote? We don't have to place him in the town where the crimes happened for it to be him. You don't? How could the guy if you can't even prove he was ever in that town, how could he be Zodiac? So the fact that he's sort of convinced, swindled, whatever word it is, whatever he did to get these people on his side, and the fact they're just going down this train track full speed ahead, uh, I I'm just shocked that at some point they don't say, "Hey, you know, we've seen the responses here," and we know they've seen some of these responses. They know we have to assume they've seen this pushback, and so far, unless you guys know different, they haven't retracted or, you know, pushed back and said, "You know what? We gotta jump off this Alex train."
No, nor have they released a second season of the podcast.
Yeah.
Well, as I hear, there is a second season of Killer in the Code coming, but I'm not sure exactly what they're going to be talking about. Furthermore, their early episodes were very short. And while I don't talk to Alex Baber, I did talk to someone from the production team who just showed up in a thread on Facebook. And I was like, are they just trying to build up support or like generate some hype, or why are the episodes so short as opposed to just laying out the theory? And that person said, they had to be whittled down because there's just so much information and they want to release it over a period of time. And I'm like, whoa, why would you do that? If you have all of this evidence that is convincing and damning, okay, well, put it out there so people can see it, not just slowly pulling the audience in. Wait a second. Maybe if I keep listening, I'll get the answer to the Zodiac Killer mystery. And then by the time they've heard 10 episodes, they're already hooked and they either believe the theory or they want to keep listening to the program. And I just thought Killer in the Cove was a very odd presentation in that regard. But much as Ross said, no, Alex Baber has never asked to be a guest on Black Box Online Radio. I've never asked him to be a guest, and I don't really think that there would be any real benefit to do that, like on Zodiac Monday or something, unless it's just kind of like an interrogation or something, which isn't the type of interview that I would want to do. Because, like, right now, I think we're getting to the heart of the issue. Right now, we're just laying everything out and we're showing everybody that, okay, here's what we really think. And there are a lot of con man vibes going on. And there's no reason to platform somebody individually. Yeah, sure, come on my show. Tell more lies? No, I don't think so.
See, I get where you're coming from, Ned, but I almost feel like I would have him on just to call him out to his face on the bullshit
Same.
and have him respond and have his feet put to the fire and make him answer some of this stuff face to face. Which is why I doubt he would come on this show or Ross's show or your show. I just don't see him doing it because he knows he's going to be called out by any of us.
Well,
Okay, so it would be like, "You were blatantly caught lying. What's your response to that?" Well, I mean, I wasn't telling the truth, but no, I to be honest, I think he could talk his way out of that if you were to present him with contradictory evidence, because some people who lie on the internet are very, very good at it.
yeah, well, he's clearly the type of guy who would just steamroll over any interviewer. He would just keep talking and changing subjects, and you'd have to take notes to get at him.
And we'd be at a disadvantage too because he's got the master intellect too, the high IQ, and we'd be
Oh, yes.
suffering trying to keep up with that.
Uh-huh.
And modern day Sherlock or whatever it is. I mean, he's got multiple issues. I don't think Alex Baber. I'll talk about my brief interaction with him on Facebook, but to be honest with you guys, back to Drewzer's intro, I don't think Alex Baber has general, fundamental, entry level Zodiac case knowledge. And this is what happens, and nor do his supposed team of researchers, as Morph alluded to. I'm really confused at what Connolly's angle is. I don't really know his background. I don't know anything about him. I didn't listen to the podcast. That might be a huge surprise to you guys. But Connolly looks like he's just willing to take anything that comes across the desk. Like, wasn't he co-signing Hodell's theory, Ned, at one point? Like, he read that book and he's like, it sounds good to me. It's like anything that gets thrown at him, he thinks if it has a book or, in Baber's steed, a claim to, whatever his theory is. Baber's obviously going for a documentary or a TV deal. Back to what Morph was saying about the case breakers is it's no longer true crime. It's more of a form of true crime entertainment that essentially takes a case either, that most people know or find a reference that people know and then essentially bastardizes it from there. And then there's just very, very little factual research involved. So I really don't think Alex knows anything about the case, maybe enough basics to say I spent time deciphering the code. And that's the problem. The whole Lawrence thing would have worked if he didn't announce previously, Morph, that I found Lawrence's name in the cipher. So take it from us four, Zodiac community, or maybe people that are new just finding out about Zodiac. If you're working on a suspect, I think probably the worst thing you can do is try to tell us that you cracked the Z13 to the Z32, and essentially that's going to be the linchpin of your case, because it essentially makes no sense from there. And that's where Baber is, and he's already found, according to him, found two names that fit inside those ciphers. And then you can go to his grand achievement, Morph, the cherry on top, which is, oh, by the way, I sent David Aranchak my research. I sent him for some information, and that's how the Aranchak team cracked the cipher, which is absolutely laughable and hilarious. You know what I mean? So he kind of hedged his bets there. Well, hey, if some other team cracks it, I can just say that I gave those guys the solution, which I found absolutely hilarious. Sorry, Alex.
Well,
Mhm.
now, Ross, there's something to say for that, because when we did our first episode with David, he was talking about how Alex Baber asked him to sign the NDA, the non-disclosure agreement, about his solution to the Z13. And David's like, I don't do that because David is smart as well. I don't know if he's like a polymath autodidact, but yes, David knows what's going on too. And he's like, if this guy gets me to sign an NDA saying that I won't talk about his Z13 solution, that person can just use that as a leverage mechanism. They can just use that as something that they're going to share to the general public. Oh yes, I consulted with cipher expert David Oranchak, and yes, I mean he won't talk about it publicly because he can't legally, but yes, we've talked, and like he can kind of put David in his corner, but David could never speak publicly about anything like the way that he did in his 3 videos. So there definitely are things like that, and, I have no idea if Alex Baber actually has an IQ of 168. I don't think that he is, brain dead. I don't think that he is dumb. I think that he's just being very crafty with his narrative, but, like, I just been wondering the whole time, couldn't this guy have just put forward an honest investigation and still gain some traction? Why does it have to turn into like a twisted manipulation? I mean, if he had just come forward his own Zodiac killer suspect and be like, yeah, I think Marvin Merrill was the Zodiac, he may have been able to do that as opposed to saying all of these things that were either completely untrue or some of the half truths that we've already gone over. I mean, I just really think with a lot of people, and this is so far beyond Baber, some people just have this desire to lie. They have this desire to manipulate, and I don't get it.
Yeah, it happens a lot, unfortunately, and he could have even if he came forward and said, "Hey, I think I have a great suspect in the Dahlia case," here's a guy that actually knew her. So, he'd have an easier time selling that than selling this everything's gotta be connected to Zodiac somehow. It's like it's just the name, so it's like, okay, they were both in California. That's gotta be connection right there. Any crime that happens in California, you could technically link to Zodiac somehow, and we've seen that, like, so many times over the years, it's laughable.
Whenever one of these, guys come along, I'm always I'm always torn between, are they a con man or are they crazy? And I always think it's con man because they're, obviously they should know that, the evidence doesn't fit. But almost invariably, I'm wrong and they're all just crazy.
See, I
Well,
Um,
the
think going back to Deb Perez,
mhm,
I get the feeling she mighta honestly, quote, unquote, "believed" what
me
she was
too.
saying. She seemed like she believed it.
Yep.
yes.
Um, and I don't know her, I don't know her mental status, but I think she might have actually believed it, but everybody after that, it's just Gary Stewart, I listened to his book in the audio version, and I'm listening to it in my car, I'm driving, I was like, "This is a pretty interesting story," and then all of a sudden, this Zodiac angle comes in out of nowhere, and I was like, "He didn't need to do this, this would have been an interesting story all on its own, it would make for an interesting I don't know, Lifetime movie, documentary, whatever you wanna do, he could have done this because it's an interesting
Yeah.
case, but then out of nowhere, he throws the Zodiac into it. It was just it didn't need to be done, and I feel like these people have to somehow anchor themselves to Zodiac to think they're gonna be able to progress their story, and I don't even think they need to do it in some cases.
Well, now wait a
Mm.
second, Morph. I think every single person has their own unique pathway. You brought up Deborah Perez. I also believe she was a genuine supporter of her theory. I don't think that she was a liar. And I've never talked to her. But M. William Phelps did, the true crime writer. They were planning on doing something together. And his response was, she genuinely believes what she's saying. It's just she's mistaken. And she wanted Paul Stein's glasses tested, or a pair of glasses tested for DNA because she said they belonged to Paul Stein. And I was like, if she were not telling the truth, she wouldn't have come forward with that because she knew that it would come back negative. But I guess she submitted the pair of glasses that she had. She believes that her father was the Zodiac guy, Ward Hendrickson, her adoptive father, not biological. And he murdered Paul Stein, took the glasses from the crime scene, and then she's claimed that she was in possession of Paul Stein's glasses. She wanted them tested for DNA. If that had all been a scam, then that would have just ruined the scam because she would have known that they weren't the real glasses. So there are signs that tell me that Deborah Perez was telling the truth with Gary Stewart. Again, I've never talked to him, What I think happened is he was writing a book about his father. His father was involved with a real true crime case called the Ice Cream Romance. And the reporter who covered it was Paul Avery from the Zodiac case. Unfortunately, his father, Earl Van Best, was a sexual predator who abducted a girl named Judith Chandler when she was 14, went on the run, and they went to the United States and Mexico, all over the two countries, and they were what were called the Ice Cream Romance. Judith Chandler was known as the Sunday Bride. I think he wanted to write a book about that, but then got really nervous when he realized, okay, I mean, people probably aren't going to want to read this. So then he just added on these chapters about the Zodiac because he wanted to sell the book. And he's like, well, we got the same reporter, Paul Avery, covering the Sunday Bride ice cream romance story. I'm just going to paraphrase the police reports. And much as Morph said, once you get to Zodiac, it makes no sense in The Most Dangerous Animal of All. Susan Mustafa admitted that during their documentary that they just paraphrased the police reports at the end. Excuse me for mistakenly saying on Black Box Online Radio they paraphrased Grace Smith's narrative in the letters. Susan Mustafa said they paraphrased the police reports, and they just have this little summary at the end of The Most Dangerous Animal of All about how, oh yeah, Earl Van Best was also the Zodiac killer. He drove to Lake Berryessa with a hooded costume. And it's so flat and ridiculous. But that's another example of how nobody cared. Nobody cared. Even when they were exposed on national television for falsifying documents, people still support the theory. And then I received a comment once when someone said, oh yeah, oh yeah, then how do you explain that his name is found in two ciphers? Well, it's like, what's more important? A cipher solution that you can't verify, or someone was blatantly caught lying. They were caught blatantly lying. But
Yeah.
the long and short of it is, I think everybody has their own pathway through the ideas. I think Baber has his pathway, Deborah Perez had her pathway, Gary Stewart had his pathway. And if anything, no, it's hard to say who is the most malicious. I've already openly said I don't think Deborah Perez is fraudulent, but she's mostly faded away, as is her suspect, the guy Ward Hendrickson.
I don't think there's any question that this guy is the most malicious.
That's
Because
where I was going.
well, I actually don't agree with Ross. I think he does know the case. He's been on message boards for a decade. He must know how completely unverifiable the code is, and he knew enough to not give Tom Voigt or Mike Butterfield or Morph a call. He knew that he would get burned, and he did.
Well, that's a good point you're making, Drew, because I think novice people that think they have a real Zodiac suspect will reach out excited. Hey, I think I found this, because I get emails every week. I know Tom gets email. Everybody gets emails every week saying, I think I found the Zodiac. So the fact he didn't reach out to more people probably does indicate that he knows the case and knows that he doesn't have anything.
Yeah, and Connolly knew not to get anyone else involved either.
Sure,
like he's done his Google searches. He knows that he could have attempted to get the backing of someone of stature, and he simply didn't. I would challenge Connolly to just spell the names of the victims. I don't know that he could do it.
Yeah, I've more of that. Well, if we think Baber knows anything of the case, I've put the challenge out to him, to debate him anytime, anywhere, on any platform, and I think his case knowledge will fall apart pretty quickly, even faster than his just completely random suspect. I guess he put out the announcement that they found a fingerprint in the Black Dahlia case. That's going to be interesting, Ned, because you said the body was scrubbed for any sort of evidence. So I don't know where that fingerprint's going to come up, or if he's ever going to mention it again. One of his crown jewels was, you guys probably saw a bit of my back and forth with his YouTube alter ego that he claims isn't him, Jack Dolan, but apparently, that YouTuber knows the most about Alex Baber out of anybody on the internet. And he said that I was making up stories and stuff because here's the thing, whether he knows the case or not, Juicer, I have my doubts because he's constantly contradicting himself. So he made the announcement that the third piece of Paul Stein's shirt morph was one of the more difficult to locate. Um, and again, just his own history of grifting his way out of these other cases. He absolutely got laughed out of the Maura Murray disappearance kidnapping by those guys that do that podcast. Dave had the cuts, the clips in his videos, but I'd already watched the whole interview. That's a pretty interesting one where he told them, he has, alternative information that she got this DWI that's not anywhere in any of the actual case files. And that was also the same interview where he said that he doesn't go to law enforcement comes to him. So it's been quite quite difficult to believe some of these claims he has made. And again, it's just the nonsense of regurgitating these just completely random, unverified cipher solutions. Claim that they got the Black Dahlia Avenger fingerprint, and then the Paul Stein, the piece of Paul Stein shirt really did me in. But one thing that Ned covered on Black Box online radio recently is this bayonet. I guess, like in the police report, this Morph and Druser was it Hartnell that's quoted as like a bayonet type blade, but I feel like it was heavy on the type, right, and less on the bayonet. First of all, I'm not sure bayonets even have that sort of handle that I would describe as more of like a rubber K-bar knife morph that was Zodiac was described as using. But so Baber went for it in his early articles and saying that I have, the Japanese. I guess did Merrill Margolis serve in World War II? I think that's kind of what
Yes.
Baber was getting at, and this was obviously his Mikado connection. I would almost even doubt that the bayonet is the most common blade in Japan, given the 1,000-year history of katana blade making. But Ned, you exposed on BBOR that the common Japanese World War II bayonet's only sharpened on one edge, and the Lake Berryessa knife was described as being sharpened on both. So this took me exactly 1 second to Google, and the Japanese bayonets are not sharp on both sides. The standard Imperial Japanese Army Type 30 bayonet used throughout World War II features a single edge knife style blade. So again, 1 second to Google that information, which apparently is more than Baber took to find that. And then there's the point that Baber brought it to Margolis' son, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't think he's Zodiac. I don't think it's the Berryessa blade, and I'm pretty sure it's Korean, not Japanese." So there's that.
Well, I do want to provide some points of clarity. What I was talking about is that somebody actually shared this in the group, the Zodiac Killer Library. His name is Richard, not Richard Grinnell, but he said that, okay, Alex Baber is saying that he found the bayonet that could have possibly been used to stab Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, and it was a Japanese Nagoya-style bayonet. And much as Ross said, anybody can Google this. A Nagoya-style bayonet is commonly sharpened on one side. And this person actually, shared the police reports. They did all the hard work. And there are lines in the reports that state that Brian and Cecilia were stabbed with possibly a double-sided blade. Everything's possible, right? But it seemed like the examiner was leaning that way. And also, it's possible that the handle of the Lake Berryessa knife was homemade or modified. It just sounds clunky, if I can be very honest from reading the descriptions. And there was like a 1-inch piece of white tape going around it, so it sounds like it was something that had been makeshift a little bit. I don't know. To me, that sounds nothing like a Japanese Nagoya style bayonet. But yes, there's a very high chance that they were stabbed with a double edged knife, and Alex Baber produced a single sided knife. And that's a strike against it. I mean, only looking at the facts, that's a strike against this claim that he found the Lake Berryessa bayonet.
It should be very easy to test for DNA, being the polymath high level genius that Baber is.
But, that was one of the biggest pieces of evidence because it had the circled 8 on it, right? It has an 8 that's surrounded by a circle, which looks very similar to the Z13 cipher. And this is what I was kind of saying at the beginning. Some people will just eat that stuff up. Oh my goodness, That's the same circled 8 that the Zodiac used in the Z-13. Case closed. The evidence is overwhelming. And I'm like, why? It's just the number 8 or a similar symbol with a circle around it. That's not enough. You can't just
I
look at that. Go
I
ahead.
felt like it was a Mikado reach, and nonetheless, he didn't say anything about Coco the High Executioner. He didn't say anything about the Berryessa costume. More reasons for me to doubt his case knowledge.
I just want to go back. I'm going to read you an old email from Ken Narlow. This is from 2010. This is how long ago this. So Ken sent me this email. Mike, the weapon was described as a large knife, blade approximately 12 inches long, and 1-inch wide wooden handle with 2 brass rivets. Could have been a bayonet. What do you guys think about that?
I like
Absolutely. I've heard
Narlo.
that before.
Yeah, I trust his stuff. I mean, and sure, it could have been a bayonet, but as Ned said, it sounds like it was modified. And just me, I'm not so sure that Zodiac had any military, knowledge or experience. I'm not sure that Zodiac served in World War II. Your suspect is younger, Morph. I don't think he showed up for the Japan campaign. So
Yeah,
it is what it is.
definitely not. And I thought I also remembered. Do I remember correctly reading bread knife maybe in one of the reports?
I don't know
Something about
anything about that.
okay, and
That's
Maybe,
I
new.
could
but
be
it wasn't known to be serrated like a bread knife,
yeah.
and it was thought to be sharp on both sides and without a hilt, and that's where the bayonet comparison is made. Regarding whether it could possibly be from overseas military background, I think that is actually probably a decent possibility. They say homemade or makeshift because of the tape, um, and that's possible. But some overseas uh, knives do have that white tape. I mean, just to protect from slippage.
Well, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. The slippage is something that's common that a lot of people will put tape on a knife, and
Hmm.
and one thing that I don't know. I believe that he read the detective magazines that were out, and they might have had details like that in those magazines. Maybe he learned that in one of those magazines.
Yeah, or
Certainly.
maybe he learned it the hard way. Either way, I think that's what it was for, and I don't think it's ridiculous to think that this was something he acquired overseas and that he had military experience. But it's entirely guesswork. There's as much pointing away from him being a military man as there is suggesting that he was.
Yeah, there were endless supplies of military surplus, and
Yeah,
you could get stuff everywhere back then.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it's ridiculous, but I would lean away from it. And again, I don't see anything that can't be bought at Army Navy, including wing walkers.
Well, in terms
absolutely.
of, if we're asking the question, was the Zodiac killer in the military? I think there's a very high chance that he was because of just the time frame. I mean, we had World War II, Korea, and Vietnam. It's very normal for men of that age to have served in the military to some capacity. Now, not everyone did, but I mean, I just get the feeling that he did. But like Druser said, that's more of an instinct rather than like a direct statement. I can't prove it, but I guess it's more of an inclination.
I mean, I started there, but I moved far away from it, uh, you know, during my
Uh,
like more recent experience. Just he's got the worst shooting accuracy I've ever seen from a military veteran, possibly in my life.
well, I think Mike Morford would like to hear that, right? McDuff wasn't in the military, right, Morph?
No, he wasn't. But
Yeah.
now I don't know his complete background with shooting. I know later after 1974, some point he instructed shooting handguns. Um,
He
but I don't
was
know
that with
what his
his
shooting was like in 1968 on December 20th.
was that like with his job as with the Department of Corrections? Like, did he
Yeah,
become an instructor?
he trained guards, but again, I don't know how far after this was. Now the shooting, let's talk about the shooting, not to get too far off into the weeds, and go away from Alex, but, um, the Lake Herman Road shooting, it's at night, she's running. I mean, he hit her in the back, so, I mean, good enough to do the job. Um, and with Mageau, it's, you know, he's just blasting into the car enough shots that he thinks he's gonna kill him. I don't think it really required, I mean, sure, could he have stuck it in there and put it right to his head and shot both of them in the head? Yeah, but I think he fired so many shots into the car, and knew he hit him. And he hit Mageau in the mouth. So, I think he just felt he did enough to kill them, and didn't take any marksmanship. I think he could have been a proficient shooter, and then with Stein, it's right in the back of the head. So, um, you know, I don't personally think we can draw any conclusions from his shooting. He definitely did enough to obviously kill victims with the gun, but, I don't wanna get too far off in the weeds with that, but that's what I think about that.
No, let's get into the weeds. I think it's more interesting than
I
than
know
the
I know
topic at
Druzy
hand.
would like to talk about anything. Druzy would actually like to just talk about the case in general, and I understand it. I'll just say really quickly that when Lundblad or whoever described it as a type grouping on Betty's back, I just don't see the type grouping. The first shot is way low. None of the shots are even together. If he used a pen light, then he's even more of an embarrassment. I tend to think that uh, the pen light, we always see like the quotes from law enforcement, and then we see Zodiac responding to it, right? We see it at
Mhm.
Presidio Heights, Stein. You've mentioned this many times, Morphin Ned. Oh no, I don't look anything like that. Oh yeah, well I put rubber cement on my fingers, so you guys can't figure that one out either. And then I feel like Lundblad's quote that he would have seen the silhouettes at night. And then Zodiac calls that BS and says, "Why, listen how smart I am. I used a pen light." Well, did you need the pen light to literally put that pistol to like the back of David's head? Obviously not. Um, and I've been out there at night. I haven't been out there on, late December, but I've been out there early July, actually, right around this time of year. And he said there's trees all over the place. Like, just look at a Google map. There's like 5 trees on that right bluff, and then all the rest of it is farmland. There are hills around, obviously rolling hills. He wasn't lying about that, but I could see perfectly fine at night, guys. You know what I mean? And anybody running out into the street, you would have seen their silhouette. So
Is
I
that
tend to
so?
just think it's a response to law enforcement because he wants to one up them. Well, yeah, I had a pen light last time, and then if the pen light works so good, he didn't bring it back to Blue Rock, as Morph said. But I do have
And
a lot more on Baber.
I think that the pen light thing was to make himself sound more sophisticated. Like, I
100%.
I have these cool inventions that I can use to go shooting people at night, and,
Yep.
um, I don't personally think he did that. I think he
Yeah.
used the silhouettes, um, but, who knows?
I think it was
Yeah.
further proof of involvement. And even if it was light enough to see without a light source, the police presented the narrative that it was not, and
Well,
that it was in fact remarkable that he was able to shoot in the dark. And so what Zodiac did in my mind was provide an explanation.
Mhm. Sure.
Well,
Yeah, I could see it.
I
I
would
mean,
actually
let's keep in mind, Betty walked away from 5 feet away from him, so it wasn't a 50-yard shot or anything like that, guys, but it is what it is.
No,
no.
the first shot would have landed within 5 feet. There's nothing remarkable about that. Um, but if he didn't have a light source, he needed to continue shooting for another 15 feet anyway.
Sure.
Well, I would actually like to bring up something about Blue Rock Springs because it's very relevant to this. I know many of you guys know that what I think about Blue Rock Springs is that at Lake Herman Road, the victims tried to escape by both of them running out the passenger side door of the car. And then the Zodiac just, by his own instincts, walked to the passenger side door at Blue Rock Springs. But I recently did an episode on Black Box Online Radio about the suspect George Waters, who was a stalker of Darlene Ferrin, and to all of the people who think that Darlene Ferrin was the key to the Zodiac killer mystery, she's the center of it, she's the primary target. Well, Why isn't there anything personal about her murder at Blue Rock Springs? The Zodiac approaches the passenger side of the car. He also isn't trying to get her out of the car. He isn't being confrontational with her. He's not making her look him eye to eye. He's also not even really paying attention too much to how he's shooting at Darlene. Mike Mageau was even possibly a bigger focus at Blue Rock Springs. On the most recent Zodiac Monday, I was even saying that, I get this George Waters narrative. I understand it, but there's just nothing personal about the Darlene Ferrin murder. What do you think?
Didn't shoot Mike Mageau in the head a la the David Faraday MO to get control of the female. So the list goes on.
Yeah, because he could have easily killed Migeot and then kidnapped Darlene or whatever he was gonna do to her, so, um,
Exactly.
and
Forced her out of the car and just be like, "Hey, this is, I'm gonna murder you because you did something bad to me or you weren't respectful or you're a bad person." None of that happened at Blue Rock Springs. So to me, that suggests that there's something very impersonal about the Blue Rock Springs shooting and also with Lake Herman Road. Very impersonal. It doesn't look like
Agree.
there's any type of real revenge killing that is going on with the victims. With Elizabeth Short, all revenge. All, like someone is inflicting their animosity onto the victim. But with the first two Zodiac crimes, it just seems like the victims were targeted, and there wasn't a specific reason why these specific people were chosen. They were just murder victims because the Zodiac wanted to kill people. He had this plan of committing a set of homicides to get his name in the paper so he could use his symbol in his ciphers and create this attention campaign. He wanted a bunch of attention in his own narcissistic way. Just what I think.
yeah, and
I'd
I
go further and say the locations were targeted.
yeah,
Yes, I agree, Ross. I agree.
he knew he could find victims there, and I think Julia Cali did a good job in the last episode of talking about that because,
Yep.
the Zodiac got in and got out for the most part, did a lot of shooting, in the one case stabbing, and was out as quickly as possible, whereas we know Black Dahlia's killer was methodical, spent
Took his
lots of
time.
time with her doing the terrible things that he did to her, so they clash wildly with each other.
Yeah, it was a project. If you guys care to, I think, David brought it up and perhaps Julia as well, but just this supposed painting of Elizabeth Short, and I'll just say,
Ugh.
Morph and Ned have been following true crime cases way longer than me. I only started looking up the Black Dahlia recently, but I am from New England, spent a lot of time in Massachusetts, so I definitely have an interest in Elizabeth, being she was from there. But this painting that let's let's talk about this gibberish that's like written in there that Baber says is Zodiac, because I feel like I do a better job reading the random characters at the bottom of the Exorcist letter than I do that gibberish that they highlighted that they claim says Zodiac. The whole thing makes no sense to me.
It reminds me of, like, when you're at the eye doctor and they wanna test your eyesight and you start reading those lower lines that you can't see. That's what I'm imagining him looking at and say, "I see Zodiac."
Unfocused, yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
I think though the picture is one of the weakest parts of the presentation because it's so ambiguous. It's not specifically relevant to the Zodiac killer, even if you found the word Zodiac. So that doesn't mean that it's related to the Zodiac killer. I mean, how many things had the word Zodiac on them? Watches, cards, other books. I mean, even if like that was actually written by Marvin Margolis Merrill, how do we know that that's a reference to the Zodiac killer? I mean, I just don't that is one of the most frustrating parts of the entire thing.
You know, the
Zodiac also called himself the Zodiac and not just Zodiac for the most part.
Yeah, and, I think what it is too, like, the general public that doesn't know the Zodiac case like the back of their hand. Like, all of us have spent hours, hundreds, thousands of hours on the Zodiac case. Most people haven't. They might know a little bit
Yeah.
about it, maybe they've seen the movie, maybe they read a book, but they don't know the case in and out, they don't follow it nonstop. So they don't know that some of these things are not as powerful as Faber's making them out to be. They might hear something and say, "Oh, that's really interesting. He had a zodiac, a drawing in his house with the zodiac written on it. Oh, that's got to be something powerful." When in reality, we all know that it's just really flimsy and it's just a super reach.
It's
Well,
absurd. I mean, when we enter the Zodiac case, we're probably um, impressed with the suspects, the Allens, the Marshalls, and we take them uh, seriously. And it's not until you get a ways into the case that you realize that there are no good suspects in the case. And I think that Alex is and Connolly, they're storytellers. They're
Yep.
and they're not presenting a story for us. They're presenting it for people who have seen the movie and probably a little less.
And I don't know Conley's entire background, but doesn't he just do fiction?
Yeah.
Maybe he should stick to
Yeah.
that. Just start it out there.
oh well, Morph
Or,
and
yeah.
guys, I
If they
will.
want to collab, they can do a choose your own adventure novel, where you just pick your own ending and oh look, it's Margolis. But again, none of these things, the Baber cipher solutions are absolute crap. The painting, I saw nothing there. The bayonet, like I really saw, other than tying him to saying he lived in Oceanside and trying to tie him to Ray Davis. And oh, by the way, you had Susanna on back in the day, Morph, and she actually worked on the Ray Davis case, and they,
Mhm.
the killer did touch the belt loops, and may have touched some other things there. So if they had like Merrill's DNA sample or whatever from his son or whatever, I don't even think that one would be that hard to corroborate based off that, or he just isn't looking forward to the no he's going to get if he submits it.
And
So
who knows, maybe he already has. Anything that we know that anything that has pushed back or not gone in favor of his theory
he
probably
won't
isn't
highlight.
being shared with the public.
Yep.
Well,
Well,
I thought his solution for the Z32 was promising. The one that he ripped directly off of Richard Grinnell's site and changed one word. Um, I
nice work,
I
Rich.
I I actually think it's a good thing that people will take someone else's work and build on it and try to fine tune it.
All
But
right, well, gentlemen,
yeah.
I told you I couldn't stay on for very long today, so I'm gonna have to tap out now. But excuse me for that a little bit early, but
Oh,
not doing my best today. But other than that, I would like to say more. Thank you for having me on, and
no
Drewzer,
problem.
Ross, and we'll do it again sometime soon. Okay.
Definitely.
Sounds
Sure.
good.
Good talking to
Talk
you,
to you
Ned.
soon, Ned.
See you later,
Bye.
Ned.
The problem with the Alex Babers of the world is they need enablers. They need people to sort of back him, because if he just
Mhm.
came out by himself with no Michael Conley and his team and investigators with a resume, it wouldn't get as much attention. But now he also hits the media and the press. This is something that's been going on really for the last few years, where all of us that know the case, they don't want to talk to us. They go right to the press. They
Oh yeah.
have a media release, and the press doesn't ask any questions. "Oh, you solved the Zodiac case? Tell us how you did it." "Oh, great job." And then the same news outlet 2 years later is saying the same thing about somebody else. It's like, don't they ever say, "Hey, wait a minute. We just ran a story 2 years ago about somebody else that solved it. Isn't there any kind of fact checking?" And doesn't anybody check the news anymore and just say, "Is this legit?" Do they reach out to the police and say, "Hey, SFPD, is the case solved, or is it still an open investigation?" There's no work on the press, and that enables people like him to keep going. And I know 2 years from now, somebody else is gonna do the same thing if this case is not solved. There's gonna be another Alex Baber. And really, Dave's work on his YouTube videos, it was like the most massive digging into this. It's like I told him he should start doing these kind of videos on a regular basis on different stuff because it's so fascinating, his deep dive into this, the stuff he found, the lengths he went to, and the media doesn't even do a fraction of this. They just put the
No.
thing out there, they want the clicks, they want the headlines, and they don't care if it's true or not.
Well, yes and no. In Dave's video, he highlighted a few production companies that had been contacted about this story, and they did their own fact checking, and then they distanced themselves. They didn't go through with the productions.
Well,
So
that is true.
what we hear
That is
about are the
true.
ones that did
Yeah,
go hook, line, and sinker, and uh, because it's such a massive case, and now we're talking about two massive cases, uh, it is too much to do the legwork. When you see these terrible documentaries come out, even with Netflix money behind it, they're overwhelmed. They're
yeah.
halfway through the production before they realize that it's all bullshit.
Well, and it's weird because I think back to the Gary Stewart documentary. And I don't know if they meant that all along to be a where they punk Gary Stewart at the end and or if they realized sometime along the way that they were getting duped and they said, "Oh, we're gonna look really silly if we don't come out with this." So that ending kinda shocked me, and I'm sure it shocked him too. So I don't know what happened there, but it was interesting that at the very end, they made it seem like he was a grifter.
Yeah,
I,
they had to
I'd
save
like
face.
Yeah, I'd liken it to what Ned said about DB Cooper and what you said about the Code Breakers morph with this guy Colbert when he got, I think it was a HBO documentary, and he had this suspect Rackstraw, who essentially nobody in the Cooper vortex thinks is DB Cooper, and towards the end, members of, I think this was the Code Breakers or whoever, towards the end, members of his whole team were like, "Yeah, we're starting to drop out now. We don't think Colbert has it." You know what I mean? It's like you watch this big documentary about how this guy slam dunked it, and by the end, his own team is dropping out on him. This gave me the same feeling, Morph.
You've gotta be suspicious when somebody says they've solved not 1, but 2 high profile cases. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, Baber claimed to have information on the Maura Murray case, and that got
Mhm.
pushed back from Tim and Lance over at Crawlspace that know that case like
Yep.
the back of their hand. Now it's the Zodiac, and then you had the case breakers. It's Zodiac and it's DB Cooper. I mean,
Mhm.
anytime people is and then you go to Ed Edwards, who's the guy that pushed the Ed Edwards nonsense that he
Cameron.
Yeah.
yeah, he killed everybody. JonBenet Ramsey, even
Yeah.
her. I mean, it's
Well,
insane the amount of claims that these
well,
people will make, and, I don't know, sometimes I think people lie and con so much that they don't even realize that that's happening. I worked with a guy one time, and we used to just be entertained by his lies. We would let him keep going because he lied so much, and the stories just got more entertaining to us and more grand that we never really pushed back on it. I mean, at one time, he was telling us he was a WWF wrestler and stuff, and he was supposed to wrestle Hulk Hogan, and but they wanted him to take a loss against Hulk Hogan, and he refused to, so they kicked him out of the WWF. And
Mhm.
he's telling he's telling us with a straight face, and we're just trying not to bust out laughing. But these people, I don't know if he believed it or he was so into the lie, he never shied away from telling it like it was the honest
yeah.
truth. So it makes me wonder, are these people do they believe some of this stuff they're telling, or, are they just so hell bent on the con that they're just it's one lie after another?
So with Baber's history and David Oranchek's trilogy of videos, which I highly advise the Zodiac community to go watch if they haven't seen them yet over on David's channel. I mean, obviously a pathological liar, obviously a con man. I mean, he got mad about the used car salesman comment, but from his own history, it showed that he was registered as one at some point. And I mean, that's kind of the point I think Morph was making is these background checks cost like 99 cents on the internet. You know what I mean? So why these TV and supposed media productions haven't done that on him? I mean, con man, grifter, absolutely. But I don't think any of that comes to what a bad person he is from what we learned from David's videos, because I don't know if that was the Atlanta child murders there that he was supposedly working on down there, and he was grifting the family for hotels and media appearances. It's like, man, there's a special place in hell for someone that will do that to, victims of a known crime that lost,
Yeah.
family members. Like, these victims have been through enough. Zodiac victim families included, and I
Yeah.
feel like Baber doesn't have any concern for them. Alex Baber is concerned with Alex Baber. He doesn't care about the Zodiac crimes, who the Zodiac's identity is, or the Zodiac's victims' families. You know what I mean? He has one goal in mind, and that's just to get whatever TV media production deal he can get. And he's completely devoid of facts. I mean, you guys were just talking about the case linkage there. I mean, this guy went for Black Dahlia, Zodiac. He said it was connected to the Chicago lipstick murders and the Atlanta child murders. So he essentially has Zodiac doing every murder in American history. You know what I mean? I'm surprised he didn't go for Lizzie Borden. It was really wild.
Well, maybe that's going to happen in season 2 of the podcast. Maybe those claims are coming.
I should have never said it.
You're going to give them ideas.
Yeah.
No,
No,
what am I doing?
That's
It's
the last
sick.
thing we want.
Yeah,
And
The-
horrible.
and like I said, it's a shame because there are real victims involved. Their families hear this stuff. Maybe they see the news and they're like, "Whoa, could there be something to this? Is the case finally solved?" They get their hopes up, and unfortunately, we know that this is not the end. This case is not closed, and he hasn't solved anything. Um, and again, unless this case gets solved, I know 2 years from now there's gonna be another Alex Baber.
Yeah.
It's every 2 years or so, it's like clockwork. And you guys bring up good points that some of the production companies are pushed back and said, "You know what? We suss this guy out and he's not legit. We're not rolling with him." So to their credit, they did that. But there's some TV places that make shows, they just want to get views. They just want to get, the revenue that comes with it. They don't care if it's
Clicks.
true. Yeah, they don't care if it's true, which is unfortunate.
yeah,
Yeah.
I wouldn't let anyone in the chain off the hook. These consultants had a job to do and they didn't do it. Clearly, they didn't read anything about the Zodiac case, or if they did, they didn't read anything about the Dahlia case. None of those
Mhm,
people
mhm.
knew both of them. And to give airtime to this kind of exploitation is cruel
Yeah.
and
There's
despicable.
there's no other
I
way around it. And like I said,
I
if
really
it's
just. Oh, go
K
ahead, Mark. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, if it's a well-meaning person that legitimately thinks for some reason they found the Zodiac and they wanna
Mhm.
help and they come out and say, "I think I found him," and they email any of us, or reach out to us somehow and say, "Hey, can you take a look at this guy?" That's one thing, but to, like, do this press release, make all these bullshit claims, and just
Yeah.
be a snake oil salesman that's selling,
Yep.
damaged goods is just ridiculous.
Yeah. I I really despise Alex Baber, and it's because of the reason for what Ned said before he left. When they come out with these outrageous claims, my dad was the Zodiac or whoever, my granddad or whoever, and then it just goes away. Like you guys said, nothing happens. There's no consequences. No one calls them out. I feel like the DB Cooper vortex is a little bit better on that because those guys are super well read, and like, hey, like Ned said with the Dan Grider thing, I found Cooper's parachute, and they're like, yeah, that's not even the right style parachute that DB Cooper used. But we're right back to the same thing with this, with this bayonet and people that come up. The Netflix documentary when they tested the knife, more of a, fortunately they brought Susanna into that, who I totally respect, but you know what I mean? It just ended. There was no explanation. So it's like all of these things always happen, and that what opens a lane, which is what Ned and Morph were saying, where, okay, hey, look, I've looked at this Zodiac case that's been unsolved. And then, people make these outrageous claims. Gary Post, Earl Van Best. There's there's some Facebookers out there making a claim that their grandfather is the Zodiac. It's an absolutely horrible case, horrible suspect. Druser actually corrected them on the facts on their suspect not being in California when one of the Zodiac letters was mailed. And that's where the Zodiac case knowledge is key, because unlike, I mean, Black Dahlia has maybe one letter or whatever, but unlike all of these other cases, short of Black Dahlia and Son of Sam, Zodiac has this massive amount of correspondence that none of these other serial killers have, not even Jack the Ripper. So you start to see these cases fall apart when they say, well, the way Morph started, I don't need to put him in town. I don't need to put him in state. I'm like, so your guy is like in Alaska or Antarctica, the North Pole. And then what about all these letters mailed from downtown San Francisco? And it all comes down to, the only thing that the FBI has verified in the last few years is David and his team's solution. So when
Exactly.
Fox News and Newsmax and these complete crap media organizations come out and say, the guy says Marvin Margolis Merrill is the Zodiac killer, and then you read the article and you're like, Zodiac Motel in LA, and Baber said, hey, I have the LAPD working on that. It's like, dude, LAPD didn't really work on Zodiac. It was SFPD. It was in San Francisco, I don't know if he's reaching for Riverside there, but that's not LA either. So,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? You can see my frustration, guys.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, because, like, little things like the letters, like, um, all these letters that Zodiac mailed, we have a nice little paper trail from him, but I even remember seeing on Tom's site somebody saying, "Well, they did have these mailing services where you could have a letter mailed," and it's like they're super
Yeah,
stretching to try and
remailing.
explain
Yeah,
how it
I
could
saw that. Yeah,
how it could fit possibly happen when it's really a reach.
yeah,
Like, I go to Don Chaney, the guy's in Los Angeles, yet he's somehow mailing letters from San Francisco on weekdays. It's like, give me a break. I mean, it's
yeah. But
there's
Pomona
easy
or
things
whatever.
that can help rule someone out. So why don't we just do that when we can, and subtract people from the equation, not keep them in there by trying to explain these crazy situations.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
probably and there's possi I mean, something can possibly be true, but that doesn't make it probable. And people stay in the, well, it's technically possible, uh, sector and just build away and they have fun with it. And, for the audience that we're talking about, that's what they're in it for too.
Yeah. And like I
yeah,
said, I encourage people, if they legitimately think they have a Zodiac suspect for some reason, come forward, put them out, s- put it out to the Zodiac community that knows the case, that have been discussing the case and spent hundreds of hours reading reports and stuff like that. Let them tell you the honest truth. And and probably you're going to hear that stuff you don't like, but they circumvent everybody and just go straight to the media and the public that doesn't really know the case that well. And, because they know that what they're selling is BS. That's my BS meter. If they go around the people that know the case best, there's a
yep.
reason they're doing that.
Or, I
Absolutely.
mean, never mind the Zodiac community. You can take it to the FBI, SFPD, VPD, Napa County, Solano. You know what I mean? But it seems like they don't even really have the case knowledge that those are the legal bodies or LE bodies that are in charge of those four Zodiac crimes. I'll talk about my one interaction with Baber on the internet, and I don't feel like I'm talking out of school here. He came into my group, the Zodiac Vault on Facebook, where I'm the admin, and this is right when Dave's, I think, first couple of videos dropped, and he was in the post, he was in the comments a little bit. I think David was in there, had posted his video. I'm not sure if it was the first or the second, and I added Alex on the post, and I said, Hey, take a look at this David Aranchak video. How's this working out for you, bud?" And his response was, I'm quoting Alex here verbatim, "Any publicity is good publicity." And I think that shows us all what his interest was. Now, when the next Baber video dropped, I can't remember if that was the second one or the third one, which was the deep dive of Baber's sort of fraudulent grifting history and career. I I again responded on the same thread, hey, Alex, do you still think that this is good publicity? Just curious. And at that point, I think he had left the group and had no longer interacted with myself. But I thought you guys would enjoy that one.
Oh, I
Indeed.
definitely. And it's got to be. One part of me thinks, okay, it's got to be awkward for him behind the scenes because now he's got all these people on his team that maybe they're doubting him. Maybe the public knows what's going on, but then part of me thinks it's full speed ahead. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. It's
Yeah.
not affecting him.
Yeah.
He's continuing. He's going to spin it however he can to explain the faults that have been pointed out, and just milk it as long as he can. Because once he's ended, once this is over, it's over for him. He can't come back from it and keep going. So I think he's going to milk it as long as he can, one way or another.
Yet he's bounced out of all these other cases kind of back and forth, and he's clearly like, again, my understanding, I think Larry Hargis, he wrote the book on Black Dahlia. So he said that Margolis was cleared. So he's an absolute non-factor in that case. I mean, that's I know for lack of other words, Baber was essentially laughed out of the Black Dahlia community. Same thing with Maura Murray. Essentially the same reaction he got from all of us in Zodiac. Seemed like that whole thing he was doing in Atlanta didn't work out too well for him. So how far does it go before he's burned out every case before none of those people can stand for him? And when you're going for 107 unsolved cold case homicides, what's there going to be left? I guess he might move on to Canada, Druser. So watch out.
I got a different plan. I see him building a time machine, going back to London and solving Jack the Ripper.
I see it coming.
Why not?
I found his cloak. I found the knife. I found his cloak.
Exactly. I went out, bought him a beer, and he confessed to me.
I found a cipher in the From Hell letter, and it literally has Marvin Margolis' name, but he wasn't born yet,
We covered a lot of ground. I think it's pretty fair to say we're all on the same spectrum. Ned's on the same thing as us, that this is just a complete grift, a non-starter. He's, this guy's theories are just flat out not just wrong, but they're bullshit. He's a snake oil salesman. So, to close things out, what are your final thoughts, guys? What do you want to say, and how do you want to leave off?
You can take it, Andrew.
Yeah, I have nothing to say to this fellow. I think all of the consultants should come forward and say that they did not do their work and they are sorry. And I don't know. Fuck Michael Connelly.
There you go. That's some strong. Who knows? Maybe he'll come to his senses and he'll have somebody on you like Drew to push back and tell the truth. Maybe he'll realize, hey, I got conned, I got duped, and I'll bring somebody like Drew on, and maybe we'll hear you on his show doing something over there.
Absolutely, and I'd start buying his books again.
Oh, there you go. And what do you think, Ross?
I think Michael Connelly should cancel season 2. Alex Baber, I'm not a fan of you based on especially that third episode of David Oranchak's trilogy, which really went into the deep dive of who Alex Baber is. That other short video popped up, I think it was yesterday, Morph, by a woman who said she either knew or dated Baber. He lies about stolen valor. He apparently stole the whole autism origin from this lady's son. Unverified, I don't know if that video is true or not, but given what we do know, pretty much factually proven about Baber, doesn't look good. So I think he's just a horrible person. I don't want him anywhere near the Zodiac case. I'd probably be better served not near any of the other cases either. But open challenge. Alex, I'm up for the debate anytime. I put it out to you on Facebook. I feel like I'll mop the floor with him in Zodiac case knowledge, but hey, maybe the guy surprises me. Maybe he pulls out Paul Stein's shirt on the webcam and, leaves me dumbfounded. Do I think that's unlikely? Yes, but, Ross Tracy, Zodiac Files, episode 5 coming soon, the Lake Herman Road ambush. And, yeah, I agree with probably, what Grinnell and Druser think. The guy is just a total waste of time. I mean, it's what we've all said. Whenever one of these guys comes out, like I'm going to say it again, a warning to the Zodiac community or new people just finding about the case that you're starting to read up on Zodiac. If you start with a suspect and you tell us that you have solved the Zodiac crimes without learning any of the canonical dates or any of the victims' names, that was another famous one, Morph. This guy on Facebook says that his grandfather is the Zodiac, but he says that he can't remember any of the victims' names or the dates. I'm like, dude, it's like 4 dates. Like, it's not like 5,000 years of ancient history, you know? Like,
Yeah.
it's not that complicated. I knew that probably my first year reading about Zodiac. And then the ciphers. If you skip over David Aranchak's team and just told us that you nailed the Z13, the Z32, I'm just being real. It's very hard to believe that, guys, you know? And again, I don't ever talk about my background, Morph. You know, I have an A average bachelor's and master's from Northeastern University College of Engineering. So I do know some things, guys, regardless of the internet persona that I, play on my channel. You know, when I see a Baber, I'm just like, I don't see this guy dealing with factual reality in any facet, you know? Like, Druser said, maybe the guy has been reading up on Kane, reading up on the case for years, but from what David laid out in his trilogy, you know what I mean? I just see you going in the total wrong direction. Of course, there was that French documentary where he zeroed in on Kane, on his cipher solution over pandemic. And, like David said, maybe that's a reason for why why Baber dropped Kane, Okay, well, this French documentary already covered that. So I have Margolis, who's already been cleared out of Black Dahlia. Had he came with the Texarkana Moonlight murders, I would say, okay, that's a serial killer who has a similar MO to Zodiac. I mean, I don't think they're related other than maybe Zodiac taking influence, probably not the same killer, but like he went with a totally random one where the woman was dismembered and drained of blood and stitched back together and left in a half torso. Like that sounds more like those torso murders that occurred before Jack the Ripper, as you mentioned, Morph, and less like anything Zodiac ever did. I mean, he certainly was never that hands-on, at least in anything he claimed. And we know Zodiac was a big, boastful ego that he loved to write us novels to the newspapers. So that's my take on it, folks.
Well, it's a good take, and, just the newbies out there, anybody new, everybody in the Zodiac circle has already left this guy off the map. Everybody knows knows anything about the Zodiac case, knows this guy is full of shit. But to use Zodiac newbies, to anybody that's just has a general interest in the case, maybe you're hearing these headlines, I can assure you the Zodiac case is not solved, and very, very, very strong chance that the Zodiac killer and the Black Dahlia killer are 2 different individuals. Any expert will tell you that's most likely the case. And I think this is just if you came hoping that there was some finality in either of those cases because of what you've been hearing about Alex Baber, I can assure you there's not. You've been duped, and it's time to time to move on and maybe look into some other suspects. Go look for one of your own. I always encourage people. You think you can solve the case? Go out and try and do it. But you gotta be ready for pushback, and, if you really think you found somebody that's worth mentioning, bring it to the attention of the police, bring it to the people on the various Zodiac forums and Facebook pages and stuff, and put them out there and see what people have to say. Um, that would be my 2 cents. Um,
Agreed. Look to the FBI, look to SFPD, look to VPD. Don't look at Fox News, Newsmax, Daily Mail. Wrong sources.
yeah. So just, one more time, guys, where can people find you guys if they wanna reach out? Maybe they have a great suspect they wanna pass along to one of you guys, or they just wanna pick your heads on something. Where can they find you guys?
I can't be found.
You don't wanna be
Cruisers.
found, or you can't be found?
No, you can, I can my name is, Druser on, Tom Voigt's, Tap a Talk, which is the message board for ZodiacKiller.com.
And
Drew's
he's a
is undercover, but
long
you can find
Go
it on
ahead.
my channel.
Yep.
Uh, YouTube.com/Planet X Film. My series is the Zodiac Files. We have the main series, which are on site, in person deep dives of the non canonical and canonical locations. Episode 5 coming soon. And you can get at me at Twitter. My name at Ross Geraci, PXF. Yeah, always down for some back and forth.
Good stuff, guys. And if you want to find this podcast, we're on every major platform. Just search for favorites. And we're on X at Podcast Zodiac. So thank you guys so much. This has been very enlightening, very entertaining. And I'm glad you guys were here to help push back on this nonsense.
You bet. Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Zodiac Speaking. If you'd like to help more people find the show, please take a moment to rate and review us on the podcast platform you're listening now on, and make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any new episodes. Just a reminder, new episodes of Zodiac Speaking will air on Saturdays. To support this show, please consider an AbJack Insider subscription through Apple Podcast. For only $4.99 a month or $49.99 a year, you'll get not only ad-free early access and bonus content for this show, but for every show on the AbJack network of podcasts. Just head over to Apple Podcasts to get started with a free trial. If you want to follow or interact with us on social media, we're on every major platform. Simply search for Zodiac Speaking Podcast on your favorites. You can also find our homepage at zodiacspeaking.com. This is Mike Morford, and I'd like to say thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of Zodiac Speaking.